You know what hurts more than a direct insult? Being treated like a fool while someone pretends to help you. I was still figuring out the Henderson family dynamics, their Sunday brunches in Charleston, antique furniture that spoke of wealth, and those tight-lipped conversations that said everything but revealed nothing. When Victoria cornered me on the wraparound porch of their historic mansion, she held her mimosa like a scepter, wearing a silk dress that likely cost more than my monthly salary. "You're adorable," she said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle in her designer sleeve. "Really? I see why Daniel fell for you, but just to be clear, this family already has someone who knows how things work here." I tilted my head, pretending to be confused. Her smile grew wider. "I'm the perfect wife," she declared, like she was claiming victory. "You're still figuring things out." Then she lightly touched my arm condescendingly. "You don't really belong here, but you're trying so hard." She glided away without waiting for my reply. Women like Victoria don't insult for conversation. They do it for control. I didn't react right away. I observed. I'd learned something about people who consider themselves perfect. They expect admiration, not competition. And this one had no idea how shaky her position really was. The Hendersons were Charleston royalty legacy, reputation, Southern charm wrapped in engraved invitations. Every Henderson wife was expected to blend in graceful but not attention-seeking, helpful but never in the spotlight, decorative but never loud. They didn't spell it out. They smiled sympathetically when your handbag didn't match your outfit, or when you brought cornbread to dinner instead of the right wine vintage. Victoria knew this script well. She'd been raised in the right Charleston circles and attended the right boarding schools. She married Thomas, Daniel's older brother, and slipped into her role as if she had practiced it since childhood. Pearls, the demeanor, the charity boards, and the inherited china she spoke of like family heirlooms. She didn't just know what it meant to be a Henderson woman. She was the blueprint, and she believed that made her position untouchable. Mine. She thought I didn't deserve a seat at their mahogany dining table. I grew up in a world without place settings. My family didn't vacation in the Hamptons. We didn't host charity luncheons. We couldn't understand why your decorator's pedigree mattered in casual talk. I entered the Hendersons as a complete outsider. Daniel, the sweet man he is, thought I'd be welcomed as soon as we exchanged vows. He believed bringing me to family dinner would be enough. He thought if I smiled and wore the right dress, they'd embrace me immediately. He didn't realize that women like Victoria don't share the spotlight, especially not with someone who hadn't learned their unwritten rules. I never tried to be her. Not once. But I did something possibly worse. I made people genuinely laugh. Not polite chuckles or forced smiles, but real laughter. At family gatherings, during conversations where Victoria corrected someone's table manners or bragged about a fundraiser, she'd personally organized, meaning she paid others to do a TI, caught their attention. They were supposed to focus quietly on Victoria. Instead, I started drawing in their light. The moment I knew she noticed came at their winter soiree at the Henderson estate, with the fireplace crackling and dinner cleared away. Victoria was sharing her perfectly rehearsed story about an exclusive gala, dropping names we all should recognize. I wasn't really listening, and neither was Daniel's aunt, from the look on her face. So when I chimed in with a small comment about how, honestly, all galas blend together once there's a signature cocktail and sponsor wall, the whole table erupted. Not with huge laughter, but enough. Victoria's expression went frozen, but her eyes darted toward me, then away. Not dismissal, recognition. The game had officially changed. Later that evening, while distributing coats and exchanging quiet goodbyes, she trapped me again. "I see what you're doing," she said. I tilted my head, acting innocent. "You're trying to charm your way into this family, but the Hendersons aren't. Impressed by cheap humor and desperate attention-seeking." "Really?" I replied, "because I've found that laughter helps people remember who you are." She leaned in closer, her breath cool and controlled. they'll never truly accept you. I smiled and gave her the most honest response I'd offered all evening. Then I'll make sure I'm the only one they can accept. The Hendersons hosted something called the Azalea Circle, just what it sounds like. A spring gathering held every year when Charleston's azaleas bloomed at their brightest. Always hosted by the senior Henderson couple and always exclusive to established family members. Real wives were welcome. Fiancés, absolutely not. Girlfriends, please. Only married and approved people could attend. And nobody explained the approval criteria. They just made it clear when you didn't meet it. My first year as a Henderson wife, Victoria handled the planning. She made sure I knew that repeatedly. Her emails were full of phrases like just a heads up. And if you don't know our traditions, and don't worry, I've taken care of it already. She assigned me just one task, bringing the name cards. That's it. Simple and foolproof, she said with her usual smooth smile. Even you can't mess that up. But Victoria didn't realize I had been building something quietly for 6 months. It began with Daniel's Aunt Margaret, the kind of woman everyone underestimated, because she wore comfortable shoes and openly read mystery novels. However, she had been managing the family's charitable foundation discreetly for a decade. And no one questioned her about it because they thought it was insignificant. I questioned, took her for coffee, learned how the foundation worked, where funds went, and where they should have gone. I helped her modernize their donation tracking system gently and subtly without taking credit. Then came Eleanor, Daniel's great-aunt, who organized the holiday food drive each year. She was worn out. Her volunteers were scattered. So I offered help, not leadership, just support. I created spreadsheets, contacted vendors, and brought refreshments. Nothing flashy. But suddenly, everything flowed more smoothly. When planning for the Azalea Circle began, I already earned more goodwill than Victoria had built over the years. So, when I was asked to bring name cards, I didn't just bring name cards. I had them crafted on handmade paper sourced from a local artist Daniel's grandfather once supported. Each card displayed the guest's name and a brief sentence about a cherished family memory. Not from me, straight from them. I had collected these quietly, asked gently. Aunt Margaret's lemon bars appeared at every gathering, even ones she couldn't attend. Eleanor taught us all to arrange flowers before it became trendy. Daniel's father once drove through a hurricane for a forgotten Easter ham. They weren't decorations. They were acknowledgments. And as guests arrived when they lifted those cards and smiled softly, some even tearing up, I didn't need to speak. I just stood near the entrance offering wine and watching Victoria freeze, because for the first time, they weren't focusing on her. They were noticing me. She tried to recover, delivering her planned welcome toast, perfectly rehearsed, pausing just right and mentioning the family name 6 times. Nobody laughed. Not because she failed, but because the warmth had already shifted elsewhere. Aunt Margaret raised her glass halfway through and said, "I don't know who added those personal notes to our cards, but I've never felt more appreciated." Everyone nodded. Everyone except Victoria. Later that evening, while clearing dishes, she found me in the kitchen. "I told you to bring name cards," she said. "I did." I replied simply, "You personalized them." I looked up calm and steady. I thought it would help people feel connected. "You overstepped," she snapped. I smiled gently. "No, you underestimated." After that night, the shift became permanent. Small invitations started coming my way. Margaret called asking if I'd speak at the foundation brunch next month. Eleanor emailed her volunteer list asking for my help again. Even Daniel's mother, who'd never exchanged more than pleasantries with me outside prayer circles, called to say, "I hope you'll be at Christmas this year." Everything felt different with you at Azalea Circle. Victoria wasn't pushed out. She simply wasn't the center anymore. For a woman like her, that felt worse than being banished. Victoria didn't explode. She'd never risk anything that dramatic. Instead, she did what women like her are trained to do: tighten control. She started posting a lot in the family group chat. Long messages with helpful links, recipes, and etiquette articles nobody asked for. She began planning events earlier. Then necessary, over-explaining tasks that confused no one. She sent an email titled Azalea Circle Review. That included a 12-point list for maintaining the Henderson legacy going forward. Point 7 read, "Let's keep gatherings traditional." No need to over-personalize. It wasn't subtle, but it wasn't bold either. Was desperation in disguise as grace. And it made me smile because Victoria had never needed to fight before. Not until now. But I didn't respond not to emails, not to sideways comments at Sunday brunch. Okay? And not when she walked past me helping Eleanor in the garden and muttered, "Some people tried too hard to play matriarch." I didn't flinch, 'cause here's the truth. About strategy, you never blink first. You let pieces move. You let them approach you. Now when people show their fear publicly, you don't meet them there. You meet them later with results. So I focused on what mattered the family. The holiday season approached, bringing the Henderson Giving Drive. A 3-week event Victoria had always co-shared with Daniel's mother. It was her crown jewel, the one thing she still controlled entirely. So she was furious when Aunt Margaret called me. "We're restructuring the giving campaign this year," she said. "It's grown stale." I said nothing, just waited. And frankly, the administration is chaotic. Victoria tries to do everything herself again. I wondered if you'd step in this time. I didn't celebrate. I just said yes. Victoria didn't acknowledge. Me, the next time we met, we stood across from each other at Daniel's mother's birthday brunch. She looked flawless as a waist-tailored dress, expensive skincare, every hair in place, but her smile had cracked. She watched me as I stood nearby, discussing fundraising strategies with 2 uncles. They asked questions and listened to answers. I caught her staring, and in that fleeting moment, I saw it's the worst type of jealousy. Not anger or envy, but confusion. Because for the first time, she couldn't understand how I had achieved it. A week later, she sent the family an invitation to a surprise charity event she had planned in 48 hours. Nobody went. Not because they were boycotting, but because they already had other commitments. I had scheduled the next giving drive, logistics meeting that same weekend. Organized, efficient, and inclusive. Margaret brought her famous brownies. Eleanor brought her 20-year contact list. Even Daniel's mother showed up with reading glasses and a notebook. "I just appreciate how organized you are," she said quietly. Victoria posted a photo of her empty event space with the caption, "Intimacy over popularity." The comments remained silent. At this point, I didn't need to prove anything. The work spoke for itself. Foundation events ran more smoothly. Family gatherings felt easier, less tense, and more balanced. People smiled again. Not out of politeness, but from real joy. Victoria still came around dressed perfectly and still tried to lead every conversation. But her voice no longer held weight because she hadn't lost the family's affection in one dramatic moment. She lost it gradually, one assumption at a time, while I earned it steadily. One consistent act at a time. That winter, Daniel and I hosted family for the first time. It wasn't through a formal invitation, it just happened. His mother asked if we would consider using our house. "It just feels so comfortable when we're all there," she said. Victoria offered her home the same day, sent a complete menu, suggested flower arrangements, and even provided a seating chart. Nobody replied to her message. They were already texting me about which desserts to bring. That night, I sat by our fireplace and watched Victoria help herself to wine in a kitchen that wasn't hers. She was quiet, neither cold nor rude, just quiet. She understood. The family still included her, but they listened to me. When planning for next year started, they would ask me first. It began with a small dinner party. Midweek, I invited Margaret, Eleanor, Daniel's mom, and several cousins to our home for a tasting. I had been trying out recipes for the upcoming Giving Drive banquet and thought, why not make an evening of it? There were no formal invitations or dress codes, just soft jazz, tasty food, and bare feet on hardwood floors. I posted one photo in the family group chat. It was unedited, just smiling faces and food that didn't need 3 caterers to arrange. Victoria replied quickly, looks cozy. Would have been nice to be included. Nobody responded. Not out of rudeness, but silence. Everyone who wanted to be there already knew. This was not exclusive. It just didn't require her permission. The next morning, she called Daniel's mom. I know because I received a text from her 2 hours later. Is everything okay with Victoria? She seemed upset today. That was Victoria's pattern. She never yelled. She withdrew. It might have worked once, back when the family revolved around her moods, when her silences meant something. But now it just created space for someone else's voice. 2 days later, Victoria made her move. She planned a full family event without coordination, sending a digital invite with a light message. Surprise. Henderson Winter White Brunch. Classic, elegant, and catered. Let's reconnect before the season gets too hectic. She sent the message on Thursday for that Sunday. Nobody enjoys last-minute plans, but everyone used to adjust when Victoria called. She expected the same response this time. She wanted full RSVPs, praise for her effort, and photos that would crown her once again as the one holding the family together. Instead, one aunt politely declined. One cousin asked if it conflicted with a Giving Drive prep meeting. Then came the final blow. Daniel's mom responded, I've already promised Sarah I'd help with her event preparation that day. Maybe another time? It came with no explanation or apology, just honesty. I didn't celebrate. I didn't mention it to Daniel. Didn't screenshot the chat like a trophy. I just kept preparing for the real event, the one the family already cared about, the one Victoria wasn't running, but she wasn't done. That Sunday, while we finalized layouts for Giving Drive tables, Victoria showed up. Not at her brunch, but at our door, wearing a cream dress, fully styled, with a forced smile. I thought I'd drop off extra candles, she said, her voice too light. Heard the lighting in the hall is terrible. Nobody had asked for extra candles, but I smiled anyway. That's thoughtful. Thank you. She walked through our home as if she were inspecting it, reminding the walls who used to reign. As she was leaving, she turned to Eleanor and said, You know, I almost didn't come. Just didn't want to step on Sarah's toes. Eleanor, bless her sharp, sweet soul, looked right at her and said, Honey, you can't step on something that's already standing tall. Victoria just smiled thinly and left. That night, as I reviewed the final guest list for the Giving Drive Gala, I noticed something. Victoria's name was missing. She hadn't RSVP'd, hadn't offered help, hadn't even sent one of her lengthy, unsolicited suggestion emails. For the first time since joining the Hendersons, I didn't feel obligated to care. When the event arrived, everything went perfectly. The venue buzzed with conversation. The food was flawless. The lighting, with help from other volunteers, was spot on. Most importantly, the funds raised shattered every previous family record. People laughed, embraced, shared stories, and stayed late. It felt like the family I had always wanted to join. It wasn't curated. It wasn't cold. It was authentic. The next morning, I got a message from Victoria. No greeting, just one sentence. Enjoy it while it lasts. I stared at the message briefly and then set my phone down. I knew something she didn't. I wasn't trying to be liked. I was leading because I listened. Once people feel truly seen, they don't forget who made them feel that way. The Henderson Giving Gala was over. The final thank you cards had been sent. The numbers were record-breaking. Even Daniel's grandfather, who usually ignored everything outside business and taxes, called to say, I don't know what you're doing, but it's working. The family group chat transformed into something warm and active in ways that weren't forced. They asked questions, shared photos, made plans. Every message began with, "Sarah, does this date work? Sarah, what's your opinion on this idea? Sarah, can you lead?" Victoria was still around. She commented, posted, and appeared, but her tone had changed. The lengthy messages with suggestions and links to expensive caterers were gone. The cold RSVPs followed by dramatic re-entries at events had disappeared. She was quieter now, not cold, but careful. That happens when someone realizes they are no longer being challenged. They've simply been outgrown. Then came spring, along. With the announcement of the annual Henderson Women's Weekender tradition Victoria had co-founded. But this year, the invitation was different. It had a new venue, a new schedule, and a new name at the bottom. Hosted by Sarah Henderson. I hadn't asked or pushed. The aunts approached me. The cousins voted. The elders nodded. The decision was made long before the email was sent. When Victoria received the invite, she didn't respond for 3 days. Then came a text, not to the group, just to me. "Let me know if you need planning help. I know you're still getting used to the format." It wasn't cruel or snide. It was the last flicker of a woman trying to remain relevant. I replied simply, "Thanks. We've got it covered." That was the first time she didn't reply back. At the event. She arrived late, dressed in beige something, muted and safe. The Victoria the First had met years ago would have arrived first and entered like royalty. This Victoria hovered near the back, polite and present but uninvited from center stage. Wasn't about exile, it was about evolution. Nobody asked her to step aside. Kate just stopped turning to her when it mattered. By the end of the weekend, after the last brunch and goodbye hugs, I stood in the doorway with Daniel's mother. She looked at me and said, "You know, I used to think Victoria had this family wrapped around her finger." I smiled, waiting. She added, "But I think she just wrapped herself around it. You rooted yourself here. That was it. No ceremony, no crown, just truth spoken quietly." The kind of truth Victoria would never receive because she performed, I planted. Roots don't ask for permission. They just grow until the entire foundation relies on them. Weeks later, Daniel came home with a letter. His grandfather had quietly nominated me for a local leadership award, no fanfare or press. It read, "For transforming community, family, and legacy." Not through force, but through grace. I framed it, not for the wall, just for me. Because in a world that once told me I was temporary, unrefined, and forgettable, I became the one they love. I became the one they couldn't replace. So when Victoria said, "I'm the perfect wife," "You don't belong here," she thought it was a warning, but it was really just a dare. And I didn't just belong. I became the standard.